Hi, this is Kerry with Multicopter Warehouse and the DJI Colorado store, and we're going to go over how to edit your drone footage with Davinci Resolve 12.5. Now, Davinci Resolve 12.5 is a very, very powerful video editor, and it's also free. So if you've been wondering which video editor to start with, it's kind of hard to go wrong with Davinci Resolve because it's way more powerful than Windows Movie Maker or way more powerful than iMovie. So before you're dropping a lot of money on Final Cut or Premiere or something else, check out Davinci Resolve and see if it's going to do what you want it to do. I'm doing 99% of my edits in Davinci Resolve because I just love how well I can do color correction and color grading and really create some beautiful footage. So we're going to start off with, if we look at the bottom here, there's the media tab where we bring in our footage, the edit tab where we edit the timeline, the color tab where we add the coloring and different effects, and then the deliver tab where we export it to whatever we want. So we're going to start with the media tab. Now I already have some footage that I've brought into it, and just to show you how easy it is to bring new footage in, I'll just go over and I'll grab a piece of footage and drop it into my media pool, and now I'm ready to work with that piece of footage. I'm going to go over to the edit tab, and I'm going to show you a few things that you should know that are really going to speed up your editing process and make your workflow way faster. And they're all going to be under this playback menu. So the first one is we're going to select use optimized media if available, and then we're going to use that optimized footage, which is called proxy footage, and I'm going to go ahead and set it on half resolution. On slower machines, you might need to do that on quarter resolution. And then we're going to come down to render cache and make sure that is set on smart. By default, it is on none every time you create a new project. So make sure this is on smart, and this way it's going to render the footage in the background. So when we're not using the machine anyway, and then when we go to export it, it's way faster to be doing our exports. Now, because we selected this use optimized media and the proxy mode, we actually have to create the optimized media. So we just right click on any of the things, we can select multiple ones and select generate optimized media. Now generally this will take a few minutes. I chose a small clip just so we could see how it works. And now when I bring this into my timeline here, this footage is going to run really smooth, but you can see it looks kind of a little grainy in here, and that's because it's a low resolution version for faster playback. I'm not going to use this particular piece of footage. We're going to go and grab some footage here that we shot out at North Clear Creek Falls. Now I can just drop the whole thing in here and then use the slider controls to get it exactly what I want. My normal process is to double click on it, and then using the play controls I can play through the footage, and then when it's at a section I like, I'm going to hit the I key for the in point. Then I'm going to follow that footage along, and when it's at a point that I want to stop that particular clip, I'm going to hit O for my out. So I'm setting my in and out points. And right there, now I can drag it into here. And if I have other footage and I want to try and insert it or do something else, I can drag it to the right and see I have an insert, overwrite, replace, fit to fill, place on top, append at end, or ripple overwrite. So I'm going to just append it to the end, so it just adds it to the end of my footage. And I see this red line here above the timeline. This is my rendering. So as it turns blue, that piece of footage is rendered for that output. Remember, that's on that render cache up here. Alright, so now we've got a piece of footage in here. Let's go ahead and go over to the color tab, and we can set this to fit. so we can see it. Now we need to start working on this footage. Now I shoot pretty much everything using the Cinelike D profile, which is kind of a little flatter, so I can have more room to edit it. I'm going to bring up the scopes when I right click on it and say show scopes, and I use the 2x2 layout here. This is the highlighted one. So on my left is what's called the RGB parade, which is showing the way the colors are saturated, and the right is the waveform, which is showing kind of my exposure. So the top is going to be white, the 0 is going to be black, and I want to stretch this out to make it kind of fit into all that. Now down here in the color wheels, lift is going to be the shadows, which is going to be the bottom. Gamma is our midtones, which is the mid-range of the waveform. And the gain is going to be the highlights, which is going to be the top of that waveform. So I can adjust the colors for each of those. And this wheel here underneath the colored wheel is the exposure wheel. So that's left and right versus moving around on the color. And then offset is going to be global. So whatever I do affects the entire image. So I'm only going to do that if I'm trying to create a kind of a color theme for everything. Now up here on the top right, this is what's called nodes. Now we're going to get into that later in probably another video, but for now you can consider nodes layers. You don't need to use them, but they can add a lot of powerful functionality to it, but we're not going to work on that today. So we want to increase our highlights there a little bit, move that up so it's a little up closer to the top. We want to probably increase our midtones by moving this main white line here. Now, if you notice, this waveform matches the left to right of the image. So where this water is falling is the same as this big spike in here. So we're actually looking at the image. Now I'm going to go ahead and increase my gamma. So I bring up kind of the overall color, which moved my shadows up, and I want to now bring those back down. And there we go. Now let's just look at what we've done here. I'm going to go over to the keyframes on the right and just turn off that corrector. So we can see we've really brightened up the image, but we need to bring some color into it. So down here on the bottom, if you see here, I've got contrast, pivot, saturation. So normally in my camera settings, I do have my saturation turned down because I prefer to bring that back in post-production. So 70 is about where I tend to go with that. Again, let's just see what we've done there. Really nice. Now sometimes doing that will affect our waveform and our parade. So now I want to just kind of keep tweaking it a little bit to get it right where I want. I'm going to bring those shadows up just a smidge. And yeah, this is really starting to look nice now. Now another thing, sometimes this was shot super early in the morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the color temperature seems to be a little on the cool side for me. So I'm going to go down here to the bottom where it says temperature, and I'm going to try bumping that up to like 200. There, maybe, yeah, I think that looks really good. If I go too much, you see it starts, while it makes the rocks look good, I can start getting an orange tint into this water. Let me just crank that so you can kind of see. So I want to back that down right to where that water is still nice and white. Okay, now let's see where we're at. So huge improvement in this image now. And you can just keep playing and playing and playing with these to get it exactly where you want it dialed in, and go back and you can see your before and after very easily. Now you can see we've done a lot of really cool stuff with putting this together. All right, let's go back to our edit tab and let's grab another piece of footage here. Let's find a nice little close-up of something here. There we go. We'll just do this, our little flyover. So I'm going to mark my endpoint. And as we tilt down over it and move forward a little bit, I'll do my out point, bring that down again, and we're right back to the edit tab. So I will show you a couple other things while we're here on edit. Over here, if this isn't shown, and this is, get this to fit back again. In the upper right hand corner you see inspector. So if I click on that, it's going to give me other options for compositing, zooming, scaling, rotation, positioning. So if I want to do some effects with the video there in terms of zoom, I can do that. Cropping, so I can crop an image. I'll just quickly show you what that actually means here. I'll put that on top and do a little crop right. So you can see I can do like a split screen effect with two different pieces of video playing. That's kind of interesting if you're doing like an interview thing and you want both people in there. Dynamic zoom is a way of actually zooming in post-production, making it look really smooth. Retiming and lens correction. I haven't really been using the lens correction is in the studio version. So there is a difference between the free version and the studio, which is $1,000. There are differences between the studio version and the free version. The studio version is $1,000, and it does have some other features in it that you may or may not want or need. But it may not be worth it to you to upgrade when there's other tools out there that are cheaper, like Final Cut or Adobe Premiere Elements, that you can always go from Resolve into that if need be. But I find Resolve does pretty much over 95% of what I need it to do. All right, now I'm going to go back to, let's go ahead and find another spot in this video, like maybe right here, as we do a pullback. And I'm going to show you how to do some timing effects. There we go. I actually went a little too far. I want it to end while it's still in motion. And I'll pull that guy down here. I can right click on that image here and I have a lot of options. I can change the clip speed, my retime controls, and retime curve. So what I like about Resolve is it does have some of the best speed controls of anything I've ever used. So first I'm going to just do retime controls, and let's play this clip so we can see what it looks like. Pretty nice. All right, now I can speed it up just by dragging it. Let's open this up so we can see what it says there. So we can see we're at 208%, and now it's much faster. Again, I can just crank that down even more, really speed this thing up. Now if we go the other way, this is where things can start to fall apart. If you were shooting at 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second and you want it to be a lot slower, it's actually going to start looking really choppy because it has to make up the frames in between. Now, one way to try and fix this is by using optical flow, which will try and create the frames in between. So here in our retime and scaling, I can change that to optical flow. Now, odds are it's probably not going to work too well with this shot because there's a tremendous amount of things moving. If it was more of a static shot and there was only one thing moving, it would tend to work better. So I'm going to let this render here so that it'll play back. Otherwise, it's not going to play back very smoothly. And we'll see how well this optical flow works. Now, for reference, the machine I'm doing this on is a like 2-year-old 5K iMac with 32 gigs of RAM, and I'm not doing anything to speed up the processes that I'm showing you. This is all what I'm doing in real time. So now there's our sped down or slowed down shot, a little more epic looking, and you can see optical flow did a really, really nice job on putting that together and slowing that down. Let's get really extreme with this thing and take it down to about 30%-ish. I don't want to go off the screen here. Again, we'll let it render so we can see the result. Now, I also use Resolve on a brand new 2017 MacBook Pro 13-inch, which does not run quite as fast as it does on this 5K iMac, but is still what I use for well over 95% of my editing. Is I just use my laptop because it does work extremely well. The 5K iMac is definitely a little bit on the faster side. Okay, we're almost done with that rendering, and we'll see what kind of a job it did on the slow motion. Let's take a look. Really nice. Isn't that sweet? Okay, well, what we haven't done is done any coloring on this scene. So let's go ahead and get back to our color tabs, and we can see that our scopes actually look pretty good. Those midtones are really, really low. So let's bring those up so we get a little more light inside. We'll pull those shadows back down a hair. And we're probably going to have to adjust it again once I go back and change the saturation. Change that back up to 70, put some color in there. We'll go back to the other one and we'll try and match it with like about 200, maybe 250 on the color balance. Go back to our scopes here and we'll just dial this right in. I'm going to bring those highlights down just a hair. Now on the coloring, let's take a look at this RGB parade. Now the tops, the highlights, the colors are all the same, but on the shadows, the blue comes down a lot more. So that's going to be our lift. So I'm going to come down here and work on that. If I move it away from the blue, you see it takes more of the blue away. If I move it to the right where that number goes up, it adds to it. So I'm going to try and kind of match that bottoms of everything there. And it looks pretty good. Now that affected my exposure, so I'm going to pull that down back again and just get that all dialed in. Let's take a look at the before and after. We got a lot more color in there. And so this is the basics of editing. It's pretty simple. There's not a ton to it. I can add music to this just by dragging it in here and adjusting the clips to match the beats if I want to. Over here on the left, I have things to do, titles, texts. I can do different dissolves or wipes, transitions, and audio transitions. So I just wanted to give you a kind of a basic overview of it. Now let's go to the final step and export this as something. If you are going to YouTube, I'm going to go through these two different ways. There's a YouTube preset in here, which I don't know. It does a really good job, but I want to give YouTube the best quality footage that I can to get the best results out of YouTube. So I'm going to use custom. On the file, let's go over here and we'll just give it a file name. Clear Creek Falls is fine. On the video tab, I want to be in QuickTime with Apple ProRes 422 LT. Now, this is not probably going to play very well on a low-end machine. It's not what I'm going to put on my iPad for showing people. This is going to be specifically for putting out to YouTube or Vimeo. If I'm going to keep it and it's something I'm going to play on my laptop or a media server or on my iPad, then I'm going to come down and use H.264. The reason I'm not doing H.264 for YouTube is because this is a much more compressed video format that it's going to go up on YouTube and then get compressed again. By giving it something better like ProRes, then I'm giving it much better footage, so when it compresses it, it's going to look better than if I gave it a compressed file to start with. The file size is going to be substantially bigger, but the end result is going to be better. Now with our current, most of the current drones anyway, we have like the DJI Phantom 3, Phantom 4, the Mavic, and the Phantom 4, even the Inspire 1 both of the cameras on there, they shot at 60 megabit of a transfer rate. The Phantom 4 Pro and the Inspire 2 moved that up to 100 megabit. Well, ProRes 422 LT can support about 130 megabits. So it's the most appropriate codec to use for the output. If you go to 4444XQ, where you can get like 2 gigabit, all you're doing is creating a massive file size, but you're not giving it higher quality data. So I'm going to stick with the 422 LT. I have those settings there. I'm going to add it to my render queue, and I can job up a bunch of different videos if I want, instead of sitting there and outputting them all, but and then just process them at night or whatever. So a couple settings before I do that. I'm going to come down here and use render cached images. Now if I don't use that, it's going to render it all from the beginning again, and it can take minutes or hours, depending on what you're doing, to go and render that all. If I use the render cached images, it's taking all these renders, let's go back to the edit, this blue line here, and it's going to use that information to export, making that export process super, super fast. I mean, we're talking going from 15, 20, 30 minutes to literally seconds. So I'm going to let this finish rendering here. So make sure that I have that rendered data. Go over back to the Deliver tab, make sure I have the Use Rendered Cached Images. Don't use the optimized media, because that's that lower resolution that we've been viewing in our preview, but use the Render Cached Images. All right, let's add that to the render queue, start render, and we'll see just how fast it does. Well, it's done. You see how fast that was? I mean, it was so fast we didn't even really see anything. We'll go back over here and let's play that. Oops. That is why I'm going to have to edit that out. Okay. When we're on our Deliver tab, okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add that to the render queue, and we're going to start the render. I already had that file there, so I'm just going to say to do it again. Preview as it's saving it, and you can see this is only going to take about 25 seconds on this machine. That was where we did that crop. And almost done here, 77, 80%. You can see it's extremely fast doing the output. All right, now let's go ahead and play the video here. Now I exported it as 1080 because I don't need to put a 4K image up on YouTube. There's some other reasons for that as well. We'll get into that in another video. But you can see here's our video. That just looks fantastic. That's where we did the little cropping test. And then the next scene should be our super slow motion. Very, very pretty. And that is pretty much it for getting started with Davinci Resolve. Hope you liked the video, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.